They called him Pata Seca, a man whose name meant nothing, yet carried the weight of hundreds of lives. In the fields of 19th century Brazil, his body was not his own. He was tall, dark, and strong, and that strength became his curse. Some say he fathered 200 children. Others say he was the victim of one of the most disturbing systems ever devised by humankind, the breeding of human beings for profit. This is not the story of a legend. It is the story of a man, born in chains, remembered in whispers, and buried beneath the myths of power, sex, and survival. Before we continue, do not forget to subscribe and click the like button if you love deep dives into the stories that have shaped our world. In the 19th century, Brazil was the heart of the slave world. From the 1500s until 1888, nearly 4.9 million Africans were trafficked across the Atlantic to work in Brazilian mines, coffee fields, and sugar plantations. That's more than 10 times the number taken to North America. By the 1800s, abolitionist movements were rising across Europe and the Americas. Britain outlawed the slave trade in 1807. The United States followed in 1808. But in Brazil, slavery was still law. Plantation owners faced a crisis. If they could no longer import enslaved Africans, they would need to breed their own workforce. Thus began one of the darkest chapters in human history, the era of forced reproduction. Men and women were paired not out of love, but calculation. Their children were born into bondage before they took their first breath. And in this grim arithmetic, one man's body became a tool of profit. He was born around 1828 in the region of Campinas, São Paulo. His real name may have been Roque José Florencio, though no official record confirms it. To his enslavers, he was simply Pata Seca, dry feet. Some said the nickname came from his immense height, nearly 7 feet tall, his long legs striding across fields like stilts. Others said it was because he was so strong, he could walk for miles barefoot without leaving a mark. But in the house of João Ferreira de Oliveira, a wealthy coffee plantation owner, this man's fate was sealed. Oliveira, like many masters of the time, saw opportunity in biology. Pata Seca was tall, healthy, and powerful, a man whose genes could multiply labor. And so he was forced into a life no human being could consent to, that of a breeder. In the cruel ledger of slavery, people became property, and property had to reproduce. Historians and descendants describe how Pata Seca was selected to impregnate enslaved women across multiple estates. Some were chosen for their youth, others for their strength. All had no say. The process was systematic, cold, businesslike. Women were told it was their duty to the master. Pregnancy meant protection for some, temporary value. For others, it meant another generation born into servitude. Over the years, stories spread across the region. He was said to have fathered more than 200 children. Some of them were sold before he could see their faces. Others lived and worked on the same plantations where he once toiled. It was not virility that defined him. It was violation disguised as fertility. Was Pata Seca real, or a myth born from Brazil's haunted memory? Evidence exists, though fragmented. In the town of Campinas, descendants still tell his story. In a region in São Paulo, a statue stands in his honor, depicting a towering man, proud and defiant. His descendants, hundreds, perhaps thousands, still live across Brazil. To some, he is a symbol of strength. To others, a reminder of the cruelty buried beneath the legend. A native once said, "My grandmother told me he could lift a sack of coffee alone. But she also said he cried at night. They made him visit the women. He didn't want to." His myth grew because history tried to forget him. In popular culture, Pata Seca became a sexual legend, a man of impossible endurance. But that retelling hides the truth. He was not a lover. He was a prisoner. In 1888, Brazil finally abolished slavery, the last country in the Western world to do so. By then, Pata Seca was an old man. Local stories claim he lived to be over 100 years old, freed but carrying the weight of a lifetime of forced fatherhood. Some say he died in 1910, buried near Santa Eudoxia. Others believe he lived longer, wandering between the plantations where his children worked. He left no written words, no memoir, but his legacy, carved in flesh and blood, remains scattered across Brazil. Generations born from coercion, now living in freedom. The story of Pata Seca forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The institution of slavery did not end at the auction block. It extended into the bedroom. It invaded the womb. Historians estimate that thousands of enslaved men and women across the Americas were subjected to forced breeding programs. Brazil's plantations were among the most systematic, turning reproduction into commerce. And yet, through all the horror, people like Pata Seca endured. He may not have been free to choose his life, but his survival, and that of his descendants, is itself an act of defiance. Today, the name Pata Seca is both wound and symbol, a reminder of how history shapes identity and how memory can distort the truth. He was not a myth. He was a man born into darkness, whose story still forces the world to ask, when does survival become legend? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. See you in the next video.